Based on real-life events, the film begins in 1986 at a gun expo in Toledo, Ohio. A teenager, Rick Wershe Jr., is looking over some AK-47 automatic firearms for sale and negotiating a price with the vendor. He notes that the pistol has features that are typical with Egyptian-made AK-47s, as opposed to the Russian-made ones the supplier claims to be selling. He then calls his father, Richard Wershe Sr., to verify his suspicions, and the two blackmail the dealer into giving them a substantial discount in exchange for not ratting him out and losing his license. They then return to their home in Detroit, Michigan. Richard is describing how they're both lions in a sheep's world. Here we learn that Richard is a small-time gun dealer who aspires to one day operate a video rental company. Rick, his 15-year-old son, appears to go with the flow. When they get home, they notice another vehicle in their driveway. The father-son duo soon recognizes the vehicle. Exiting the car, Richard pulls out one of the AK-47s and breaks into the house where his daughter, Dawn, is having an affair with her boyfriend, Ty. Enraged, Richard kicks Ty out of the house. After this, he and Dawn get into a heated argument while the grandparents, who live directly across the street, arrive exactly in time to witness the entire thing. Later that evening, Richard is working with the AK-47 silencers and lecturing Rick on the idea of upselling. It's revealed that he buys cheap guns from the market, updates them with silencers, and then sells them to the clients. Rick then uses his newfound information to sell the AK-47s to some local gang members he knows. He makes a lot of money by upselling the silencers and gains the respect of the gang's boss, Johnny Curry. As the days pass, Rick becomes good friends with Curry's younger brother, Boo, and begins hanging out with them. They go out to parties at a nearby roller skating rink where the gang and corrupt police officers attend. One early morning, Dawn wakes Rick up and informs him that she's leaving. He correctly predicts that she will live with Ty and attempts to persuade her to stay. However, she remains resolute in her decision. Before leaving, she gives him her phone number, ordering him not to share it with their father. Richard, on the other hand, observes her leaving and glances out the window as she and Ty drive away. Later on, he is harassed by the FBI since his firearms are ending up in the hands of local gang members. In the meantime, Rick continues to sell firearms and starts to get close to Curry, Boo, and the rest of the local gang members in Detroit. One day, FBI agents Alex and Frank approach Rick, revealing that they're aware of his involvement in procuring unregistered firearms and illegal silencers. They then threaten to apprehend him. When asked about some gang members, Rick remains silent, only revealing that they are no longer alive. Later that day, Rick spends time with his friends as they select tuxedos for Curry's upcoming wedding to Kathy, the mayor's niece. On the wedding day, he meets Art Derrick, a Miami drug lord. Later, Rick and his gangmates, Nug, Boo, Freaky Steve, and Ed, are going home for the wedding when they stumble upon a couple of their school's females. One of them, Brenda Moore, is his school crush, so Rick calls out to her to ask if she wants to join them. She gladly accepts his offer. He then gets intimate with Brenda while the other girls accompany them to a drive-in movie theater. A few days later, as Rick is heading home after a night out, he spots a stuffed duck on the roadside and decides to take it as a gift for his sister. However, his plans take an unexpected turn when a vehicle approaches, revealing the FBI agents and a narcotics police officer from his previous encounter. They inform him that the silenced AK-47s he supplied to the local gang members were used in a murder, and unless Rick cooperates, they could implicate his father. Faced with this threat, Rick reluctantly agrees to assist. His cooperation involves making drug purchases to gather evidence against the gang. This means Rick basically has to work as a police informant in order to save his father from going to jail. The process is that the teenager will initially acquire crack cocaine from a local dealer. This process repeats several times until the agents eventually provide him with a significant amount of cocaine, instructing him to sell it to better integrate with the gang's crowd without arousing suspicion. In return, they assure him he can keep the profits. Rick successfully sells the cocaine, making $4,000 in the process. One day, Richard notices Rick passing by in a car with the FBI agents. He also discovers some of Rick's hidden dollars at home. After putting the math together, he confronts his teenage son to stay away from the cocaine business, as well as the FBI agents. The two get into a heated argument until Rick takes off in his grandfather's vintage car. He then meets his sister Dawn at a cafe. While they're catching up on life, a thief steals Rick's car, which was parked in the driveway. The brother-sister duo immediately springs into action and goes after the thief. Without thinking of the consequences, the pair opens fire and chases after the car. However, they fail to catch the culprit. Just then, police officers arrive at the scene and arrest Rick and Dawn for opening fire. Thankfully, the FBI agents that Rick had been dealing with arrive at the station and free the pair. When Curry hears of this news, he becomes suspicious of Rick being released by the police so soon. But he feels that perhaps the police officers were racist, so they let go of the white boy. Curry then confronts the teenager, urging him to be more transparent and upfront about his activities. Over the next few months, Rick fully immerses himself in the gang's lifestyle, enjoying the perks that come with it. During this time, one of Curry's borrowers, Leon, visits the gang's boss's place to pay his monthly interest. Leon tells Curry that he will sponsor him and his men on a trip to Las Vegas, and also promises front-row tickets for a high-profile boxing title fight. However, upon arriving at the fight in Las Vegas, Curry and his members, including Rick, face disappointment as Leon doesn't fulfill his promise, giving the coveted tickets to another rival gang leader. When they learn about this, frustration simmers among Curry and his crew. At an aftermath party, the rival gang leader, now flaunting his triumph, denounces and taunts Curry for not being able to get the tickets. In a fit of rage, the local gang boss retaliates by fatally beating the rival gang leader with a champagne bottle. Returning to their ill-fated Vegas trip, Curry, seething with anger over Leon's betrayal, dispatches two of his men to eliminate him at his residence. Unfortunately, Leon had left just before the hitmen's arrival, and in their attempt to retaliate by opening fire on his house, they accidentally shoot and kill one of Leon's young sons. The incident sparks a media outcry, prompting law enforcement to track down anyone in possession of AK-47s. Caught in the tightening net of police scrutiny, the gang, including Rick and even Richard, begin disposing of their weapons. Curry then gathers the gang, emphasizing the need for extreme caution and vowing to take any measures necessary to evade prison. Back at home, Richard, unaware of the impending danger, shares an odd detail with Rick. He received a goldfish as a gift from a customer. Hours later, as Rick contemplates the fish, Nug, a friend and fellow gang member, unexpectedly arrives. Initially, the situation seems normal as Nug chats in a casual manner. But just when Rick turns around to fetch a soda for his friend, he is suddenly shot in the stomach and Nug flees the scene. Fortunately, Rick survives the attack. He undergoes a lengthy surgery and gradually makes progress. For his safety, he's registered under a fake name at the hospital. The FBI agents, recognizing Rick's assistance in their pursuit of Curry and his crew, inform him that their joint efforts have resulted in the dismantling of Curry's criminal enterprise. The high personal cost of this journey leaves Rick with physical scars, but it also marks the end of his dangerous association with the gang and the beginning of a new chapter in his life. One evening, Rick and Richard engage in discussions about opening a video store while driving home. However, their conversation takes a dark turn when Rick, expressing doubt about their ability to change their lives, suggests a return to dealing cocaine. The heated argument nearly leads to a car crash, but both emerge unscathed. Rick, who is desperate for a chance at a better life, pleads with his father to allow him to resume dealing cocaine. Richard is skeptical about this, but when his son continues insisting, he eventually agrees. Shortly afterward, the two embark on a mission to rescue Dawn from a house filled with drug users. They find her asleep in one of the rooms, and despite her resistance, they bring her home. They then lock her in her room to detox. Over the course of the next few days, she manages to make a full recovery. As Rick accumulates wealth from selling cocaine, he manages to fulfill his father's dream, and Richard successfully opens a video store. The turning point in Rick's life comes when he answers a knock at the door. A young child informs him that Brenda, his crush whom he dated briefly some time ago, has given birth to his daughter, Keisha. Delighted by the news, Rick and Richard visit Brenda's house and take turns holding the newborn. The joy of fatherhood becomes a pivotal moment for Rick, and he begins reshaping his priorities. Later, he connects with Curry's wife, Kathy, at the roller rink. Their conversation evolves into an intimate encounter at her place. Kathy reflects on Curry's downfall, suggesting that if he had been more discerning with people he trusted, he might not have ended up in prison, leaving her alone. Fast forward to a year later, the FBI storms Rick's house, leading to the arrest of both Rick and Richard. Rick faces charges of drug possession with intent to distribute, and given the quantity involved, he's looking at a potential life sentence. In discussions with FBI agents, they inform Rick and Richard that any connection with the FBI will be publicly denied. However, they hint at the possibility of reducing Rick's sentence if he cooperates as an informant on a very important operation. Later, Rick, with the help of Kathy, arranges a large cocaine shipment for the FBI to raid. The operation is executed, resulting in the arrest of everyone involved. However, the FBI unexpectedly exposes Rick's involvement on television, putting his life at risk. At his court hearing, the jury finds Rick guilty, and the judge imposes the maximum sentence of life in prison. Having been played, Richard confronts the FBI agents who had worked with his son. However, the agents deny making any contract or promises and declare the situation concluded. A year later, Dawn and Richard visit Rick in prison, bringing along his daughter, Keisha. This proves to be a very emotional reunion between them. The father tears up and apologizes for not being able to provide the easy life he had wanted for his son. Rick is then led back to his cell while his family returns home. The credits reveal that Rick endured more than 30 years in prison, setting a record for the longest sentence for a non-violent offender in Michigan. He finally secured parole in 2017. Unfortunately, Richard passed away in 2014 due to old age. On a positive note, Keisha, Rick's daughter, has found happiness in marriage with 2 sons. A voice recording of the real Rick Wershe Jr. plays in the background, expressing the belief that he shouldn't have been in prison. Despite the challenges, he conveys a sense of happiness and hope.